Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to No Dumb Questions. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Perry. I am really excited to have a conversation with you tonight. I get the opportunity to talk to parents pretty much every day because I'm an educator in New York and in Connecticut. And so often, especially this time of year, we're in the conversations around grades. My child's got an A, a B, or C. My child's in danger of not graduating. My child's in danger of not moving on to the next grade. And this is the time of year where parents and children are really in a tough space. Go all the way around. Really in a tough space because you want to understand really what, if anything, do grades mean? Sounds crazy coming from me, an educator, somebody who works in charter schools. We have schools in Bridgeport, 2 of them. We have schools in Harlem, 2 of them, and 1, of course, in the Bronx. And then our founding school is a magnet school in Hartford, Connecticut. And so you would obviously think that grades mean everything to me. I have a doctorate in education, went to the University of Pennsylvania for school social work. You would think grades matter to me the most. The truth behind grades is that very often what they are is the opinion of a teacher on whether or not your child followed the directions that they gave them. That's it. That's all. Yep. See, grades too often are not devised by someone working with their colleagues to look at what an A is, what a B is, and then, of course, coming to an understanding of what that grade is, and then making an assessment. It's not as often about the standards that you see in education. In more cases than not, it's really the opinion of the adult at the front of the class. Well, if that adult at the front of the class, the teacher, is someone who's learned, who's done the intellectual preparation, who's done the things that are necessary to truly understand their craft, to truly get a full sense of what it is. And they're coming to your child and your children with an unprejudiced approach on how that child has mastered the standards, then that grade means something. What it means is that this educator is educated and has the capacity to assess whether or not your child has the skills that are necessary to move on to the next level. That's what a grade is supposed to mean. But too often what it means is it means that this particular teacher sees your child in a particular way. Rare is it the occasion that a kid who gets in a lot of trouble will get good grades. I'll say that again. Rare is it the occasion that a child who gets in a lot of trouble can get good grades. You should ask yourself, why does it matter if the child behaves? If she can add, and this is a math class, then you're not grading her on her attitude. You're grading her on her ability to perform the task. If the child is in an English class and what their job is to tell you author's perspective, and they can tell you what the author's perspective, but they're not a nice child, then the nice child thing is inconsequential. And in fact, what makes the most sense is to determine whether or not the child can do the work, because that's what you're there to do. As a teacher, you're supposed to teach the children in an unbiased way. And in your unbiased approach, you're supposed to be able to also, with an unbiased judgment, determine whether or not the child has performed the tasks that are necessary to move them to the next academic level. But too often, I would say the majority of the time, people grade. People grade. Well, of course, people grade because teachers are people, principals are people. That's all true. But that's not why we're here. We're here to grade your children, to assess your child's ability based upon standards that we know to be true. That these standards help us to determine if your child has the foundational elements to move to the next level. So if they're in the 3rd grade, can they do what it is that they need to do in the 3rd grade in order to move to the 4th grade, and from the 4th to the 5th and the 5th to the 6th? If it was so that our children were being graded based upon their ability as we see fit, as we determine, as we as educators determine, then what we would do is we wouldn't just have the person who taught them that particular skill grade them. We'd actually have someone who didn't teach them that skill grade them. Yeah. See, one of the things that I've seen happen, as a matter of fact, in the past week, we have something called the Senior Social Justice Project, where children come in, they participate in basically a year-long project within which they will go through and identify a social justice issue, and they will come up with solutions. And with those solutions, they will come up with they'll identify a problem, they'll come up with research, and then they'll put forth solutions. Social Justice Project. Well, many of our students who are doing the Social Justice Project are used to being seen as the good kid. And so they're used to, on some level or another, getting that push, that bump, because they're the good kid. They're the likable kid. But when they're in front of individuals who are not affiliated with the school and don't know them to be the quote unquote good kid, then they're being judged solely on the product, the rubric that is put in place, and the standards that that rubric represents. And in that scenario, what we found even in our own school is that often children who are the good kid but may not have been pushed to the level they need to end up running into a brick wall because they don't get to charm their way through a grade. They don't get to bat their eyes through a grade. They don't get to get the sympathy to get a grade. They actually have to do the work. But most of school ain't like that. Most of school is about grading kids on whether or not you like them. The most problematic part about that is that we live in a country where there is systemic racism, and the kids who are often seen as the worst behaved kids are Black boys, followed by Latin boys, followed by Black girls, followed by Latinas, and then white boys, and then white girls, and then Asian kids. So it should come as no surprise that the children who receive the greatest grades are the ones who people see as the best behaved. The ones who they see as the best behaved, they're typically Asian and white girls. And the ones they see as the least well behaved or the bad kids are typically the Black and brown kids. And so when you see Black and brown kids getting low grades, sometimes what's happening in the Bahamas, is they are being judged on a standard of behavior, not on an academic capacity. So it's no surprise when you come in there as a mom or dad and you see your child and you think, well, wait a minute, she doesn't know how to do this, whatever this is. You wonder, you say, well, I've seen her do things like that. You have to be careful, because one of the reasons why she may be getting that bad grade is, in fact, because the teacher doesn't like her. I know it sounds crazy, right? I'm an educator. I run schools. But it's true. It is absolutely true. It is absolutely true. You will rarely find a much beloved kid who is failing all their classes, because the teachers, the principals, the social workers, the whomever, the guidance counselors, the lunch staff, the security, people work hard for kids that they like. They'll stay after school with them. They'll come before school. They'll put up with their BS because they like them. Kids they don't like, they don't help at the same level. You will be hard pressed to find a valedictorian who's not well loved in the school. You'll be hard pressed to find a child who has made it to the top of their class who isn't also liked. So, what do the grades mean? In many cases, the grades mean you got a likable kid. You have a kid that most of the teachers in the school like. But let's go deeper. That only gets you so far, because when you get to college, what does that mean? What it means, what's happening in Harrisburg, what it means is that many of the children who got away with being good kids, when they get to college, are now being held responsible or accountable for being able to do the work. And so we're not helping kids by giving them a grade for being a good kid. They're not in a beauty pageant where they're running for Miss Congeniality. They are in a school where they're being expected to learn to read, write, and compute. And it's incumbent upon us as educators to hold ourselves accountable, because I've often found it to be the case that those teachers who want to be liked the most hand out the most A's. Yeah. So it is not uncommon to see teachers who want to be liked hand out A's. In fact, there's a former teacher that I worked with, and we had the standardized state test. I'm coming to that in a second. In that time in Connecticut, it was called the CMT, the Connecticut Mastery Test. And we had the grades. And what the goal was to make sure that the percentage of children who did well on the CMT was consistent with the number of children who did well on the classes in our school. The rationale behind that is because the people who were administering the Connecticut Mastery Test were simply assessing skills. They don't know our children from one to the other. They don't know if they're black or white, male or female. They don't know what neighborhood they come from. They don't know anything about them. So we want to make sure that the unbiased, just bear with me for a moment as I go back. I'll talk about unbiased in a minute. But the unbiased perspective, or the less biased perspective that we see from a standardized assessment, such as a skill-based state examination, different than an SAT, different. We wanted to make sure that that was aligned with our instruction. So if a kid had mastered algebra or the skills therein, then the accompanying test, which at that time at the high school level was called the CAP, the Connecticut Aptitude Test, whatever, that they were similar. But what we found with this particular teacher, who then became a union representative for the city of Hartford, is that his grades, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of the kids in his class were below grade level as based upon the state's assessment, in his class, almost all the kids got A's and B's. In fact, he only had one kid with a C in his math class. Only one kid with a C. How's that possible? How is it possible that all your kids are outperforming in just your class? What is it that you are or are not teaching them? See, we don't ever push the envelope to have the greater conversation, because what happens with us as parents is, as long as we can say, my child's on the honor roll, my child's on the honor roll, my child made A's and B's, my child gets good grades, my teacher's nice. See, we fall into the same trap. When your child is on the honor roll and you, like the teacher, you think 1 and 1 make 14. 1 and 1 means your child now can read, write, and compute at grade level. 1 and 1 means that your child is ready for college. 1 and 1 makes sure that your child's school is a good school because they like your child. They like your child, and they've said so. And they've said so by showing you that they like your child, by giving your child good grades, and they've shown you by being nice to you when you come in. They show you by giving your child good grades, and they show you by being nice to you. So you think, I like my kid's school because they like me. But this is the problem. The problem is that you are being bamboozled, because I want to break it down to you. Colleges, universities, they don't really care if your child is liked. They want to know what zip code your child attends school in. It's true. And they want to know which school your child attends, because they believe that the child who attends certain schools will be more likely to get an A. And when they're looking at those schools, those mostly urban, those mostly poor schools, if your child has a 4.0, they treat it like it's a 3.0, if you're lucky. They don't see a child at an elite private school and an urban school they don't see those A's as the same. They don't see that an A from an elite school and an A from a failed urban school are the same. In fact, they see them as not the same. And so what they want is they want to be able to look at the unbiased opinion of your child, in their opinion, the SAT. Now, the truth is that the SAT is anything but unbiased. In fact, it leans heavily in the direction of white people. In fact, more specifically, you can determine a child's economic level, education level of parents, as well as the race and gender of the children, just by virtue of the fact of looking at their scores. They actually are pretty hard that you can see. Black boys are at the bottom. Latin boys are just above them. Black and Latinas are right about here. White boys and girls are about here, and then Asian kids. Remember that I talked about the kids that people like? Yeah, it shows itself again on the SAT. So I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg. I don't know if it's because the kids go to schools where people don't provide them the level of education that they deserve, that they end up with those scores, or if the scores are flipped over on their head so that the tests are flipped over on their head so that they end up producing the same results. But here's the point that you need to understand as a parent, that you need to know how your child is doing in comparison to all children, not just the kids in your child's class. You don't need to just know that the teacher who likes your kid, or the teacher who doesn't like your kid, doesn't like your kid. What you need to know is, how is your child doing? And the way to do this is to take a look at their performance on the state assessments. Now, the state assessments, these are, and every state has a state examination. Every state has them. And the teachers union hate them because what they do is they show that they're not teaching and the children are not learning. And you can say what you want. Well, standardized tests don't tell you everything. That is true. Like a scale doesn't tell you if you're a nice person, but it will tell you if you are going to eat too much tonight, as you should not eat too much tonight. It doesn't measure everything. It doesn't tell you if you're a good husband or a wife. It doesn't tell you if you're a good student. It just tells you that you need to stop eating so much. What it says. So what the scale said. That's what the scale is supposed to do. Not every scale is supposed to measure everything. The state assessments do tell us what a child can do. Rarely do we see a child who scores a 4, which is typically the top, on a state assessment, who we think, yeah, she's not that smart. We don't ever think that. Now, it's not the only indication. There are other strategies that we can use to determine whether or not a child has competencies in other areas, and we should use those. But it doesn't mean that we throw away the standardized tests. It just means that we use them as part of a broader conversation that takes into consideration the grades that they're being given in the class. But we should also be honest. Even the most seasoned teacher will be honest with you, and she or he will tell you that they don't really want a 21-year-old just out of college grading your child. They don't. But that's what happens. They don't want a person who's only been teaching 5 years grading your child. But that's what happens. See, you don't want to have these conversations, but this is the fact. The fact is that we have a very young teaching corps, and then we have people who have not necessarily developed the skills that are necessary to determine whether or not your child has mastered whatever it was they were supposed to master. And those two people are in the same place, and they call that a school. And then you're supposed to know whether or not your child can read, write, and compute because they said your child was on the honor roll and they are nice to you. You're being hustled. You're being hustled because every single time you go to the school and you think that your child is doing so well because they're on the honor roll, and they give the little piece of paper that says, Jane Doe is on the honor roll, and you're like, yay, and you give you a sticker to put it on the back of your car. Your honor roll doesn't mean a damn thing. Your honor roll does not mean a damn thing. They're hitting you with the gas, Chief. They just want you to think something, because the truth is, what you need to know is your child performing at the standards that are expected of them when they go to college? SAT isn't going to get you there, but in many cases, the state assessments will, because they are measuring skills. And those are the skills that the people who work in the colleges who help to put together those tests are saying. It's not some company like they want you to believe. Sure, a company may run the test ultimately, but those companies hired college professors, in-product users. They're saying, hey, what are the things that you want a child to know and be able to do when they get to your college class? There's a reason why over 2/3 of the children who took the SAT are not college ready. It's because they're not. But millions of your children are on the honor roll. Millions of your children are on the honor roll. And the honor roll, in many cases, doesn't mean a damn thing. It doesn't really even mean anything to the colleges. It doesn't. Saying that you're on the honor roll at a school that they think is an F school doesn't mean anything to them. It really doesn't. I've had a situation in which there was a kid who was accepted to a school who came from our school, despite the fact we sent 100% of our kids to four-year colleges, because I know for a fact that another child of a similar GPA from a suburban district got into the school. Same similar. Our SAT was a little bit lower, but similar. When the same, like they were both about 1100. One had like a 1110, the other one had like 1150, and they both had about the same GPA. The difference, mine came from Hartford. Hers came from Simsbury. They're different. Just know that one is really wealthy and white, Simsbury, and the other one is not, Hartford. So I'm going to push you, parents. I'm going to push you to make sure that you get access to your child's standardized assessments. That's a MAP examination. It's called NWEA, not MWA. NWEA MAP. That's a standardized assessment that gives you a sense of, one, where your child is, and then two, how much growth your child has had in that year. You need to know that. You need to know that because if you want to provide your child with the support that they need in order for them to have the skills that are necessary, so that when they get to college, they don't need to take remedial classes, you need to know where they are. There are other methods of doing that, but one of the most important of them is to have your child's work in your own hands and read it for yourself. If it's incoherent to you, it doesn't matter what the teacher says. If the teacher says it's an A and you know it's not an A, you saw your child not put the work in, why are you taking an A? We all do it. I do it too. Says the kid got an A? Okay, cool. But it's not the grades that are going to get your kid to be successful in school. It's the skills. And it's the reason why schools like Andover are sending 25 kids from their senior class to Harvard. Not 25%, 25 from one school. It's because Harvard knows that those kids in that school are getting the work that's necessary for them to come to college, and there'd be no bump. Just straight in. Slide right in. Slide right in. So you need to take a look at the standardized assessments. Every single state has them, and your school sends them to your house. Don't let the teachers union lie to you, tell you that the state tests don't matter. That's a lie. Again, scales don't tell you everything, but when you want to know if you've lost weight, you stand on a scale. You don't look in the mirror, you stand on a scale. It's not the only way you could tell if you lost weight. Your clothes might fit differently. There are other ways you could tell, but the trusted and tried and true one, stand on a scale. Well, the scale that we often use in education are the standardized tests, are the state standardized tests. And those state standardized tests, what you will find is what your child knows. And I'm telling you right now, don't let the system play you. Don't let them tell you that your 5-year-old is on the freaking honor roll. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? They already got y'all gassed up. My child graduated from kindergarten. No, he didn't. He just went to the 1st grade. My child just graduated from 6th grade. No, he didn't. He just went to the 7th grade. Just graduated from 8th grade. No, he didn't. He went to the 9th grade. You so badly want to believe that your child has achieved something. I get it. I have sons. I have a niece. I have kids. I love when they're successful, and I hate when they're not. But what I really want is I want them to be successful in college and in their career. And so what I want to make sure they can do is to read really well and do math really well and to write really well and to communicate really well. And despite what you've been told about Common Core, that's what it is. Really basic standards that if you took a look at them, you'd be like, oh, that's it? That's all it is? Yeah. Yep. They want you to know, here's a Common Core standard. Common Core standard in English is that they want your child to be able to determine the author's perspective. That's it. So they want you to be able to read an article and be able to say, this is a Republican writing this article, making a point about why Donald Trump won the election. Or this is a Democrat writing this article wanting to make the point about why Donald Trump didn't win the election. That's a 12th grade standard. That's high school. So when you hear that your child can't read at the 12th grade level, that's what it means. It means that if your child sat down with his phone and read an article on Google, he wouldn't be able to determine what the author's perspective was. But that same child in a classroom with an inexperienced or untrained teacher, that child in a classroom where he was seen to be a bad behaving child, that child's grade wouldn't tell you that. The state standards do. You don't have to like it. And I hate it when our schools come back and our scores suck. I freaking hate it. I hate it because I educated at 6th grade to 12th grade. And that means I have 90% of our children come to us anywhere from 4 to 6 grades below grade level when we get them. And do you know how I know that? State assessments. State assessments. That's the same way all of us know. Isn't that interesting? That the educators use the state assessments to determine whether or not a child is at grade level. But we want you to disavow yourselves of using those same state standards to determine if your child is at grade level. And so what we do is we give you the honor roll. The honor roll. 'Tis the season. Celebrate your honor roll. It is official. Your school likes your child. And you like your child's school. But is your child reading, writing, and doing math at grade level? The answer is, I don't know. But you could. Reach out to your child's school and ask them for the state assessments. Yes, even in COVID, they took state assessments. Those results won't come back until the fall, which is weird. It's a dumb thing to do, especially in this information age when you can take a test and get the results as you're taking the test. And the reason why is because the state wants to be able to come up with a reason why the scores suck. But that's a longer conversation, not for today. But you want to know if your 3rd grader can read at the same level as other 3rd graders in the United States of America. You want to know that your 9th grader can do math at the same grade level as other 9th graders in the United States of America. And once you have that information, you can provide the supports that are necessary for your child to either increase, to move up even higher, or to just get to grade level. Do not be fooled, brothers and sisters. Do not be fooled, family. Do not be fooled, American parents, by someone's opinion of your child. That's not what your child needs. Your child needs trained educational assessments. Much in the same way that if you went to a doctor, you do not want the doctor to tell you whether you do or don't have cancer based upon whether or not they like you. You want them to tell you based upon what the data says. You want their unbiased scientific opinion. Well, that's what I'm offering you. I'm offering you my unbiased scientific opinion. It is this. The state assessments do tell you how your child fares against other children. The MAP assessment tells you how your child fares, how your child compares to other children throughout the United States of America. It will literally tell you of the 12 million children who took this assessment, this test, this is where your child falls. They are either at the top, the middle, or the bottom. You don't have to like it, but this is your opportunity to correct it. All right, brothers and sisters, just know I love you. This is no dumb questions. Come with your questions. Keep coming with your questions. I want to do all I can to support you because I want you to feel good about sending your child to college. I want you to be in a position to make sure that your child is successful in college. How much would it suck for you to get your kid to college and have them come back with some cockamamie story about how they didn't get along with their roommate or some other foolishness, when what you really, really need them to do is to graduate? You send them to college. Every child who graduates from high school should be prepared to go to college. Whether they choose to or not, that's not what the point is. It's that they should be. Meaning that after 13 years of education in the United States of America, you should be in a position to go to the 14th grade. That's all college is. And the fact that so many people, especially Black and Latin children, are not, is not because they are not intelligent. It's because they've not been taught, and the folks who are teaching them have not been held accountable. I love you. Take good care of yourselves.